My name is Carl Halick, and I technically work in the communications staff at Special Olympics International in Washington, D.C. But I have the very distinct pleasure of focusing my time 100% on our health and our research initiatives. So that's why I'm here today to talk to you about something that you probably weren't expecting to hear, and that is the importance of storytelling. So why do we tell our story? There's a saying that says if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear, does it make a sound? As Darcy said, we do amazing work. You all are going to be doing amazing work. But if no one knows about it, the impact of that work is significantly lessened. And so we want to make sure that the work that you're doing is making a sound and that people are hearing it. There are two ways that we let people know what we're doing. There's data that you've heard about a couple times already, and then there are stories. What we need to do is we need to win the hearts and minds of everyone out there, whether they're policymakers, whether they're family members, whoever they are, general public, whoever they are, we need to win their hearts and minds, and we do that in two ways. The data speaks to the mind, and you'll be hearing about that later with Ed. The stories speak to the heart. And so our stories have an incredible emotional impact. We also tell our story to influence policy. This is particularly important right now. As many of you may be aware, we're looking at some budget cuts in the CDC budget and looking at actions in Congress where we're facing a budget crisis in the United States government that could affect us greatly. So when we tell our story to policymakers, we'll let them know how important it is and how important it is to keep that funding going. We also share stories internally. As you will find out when you're out there working in your programs, the way they do healthy athletes in Kentucky isn't the same way they do it in Massachusetts, and it's certainly not the way they do it in India. So one of the things we do is we share best practices. That way, programs wherever they are can know what each other is doing and determine for themselves whether that's a practice that would work for them. And then they can incorporate that or choose not to incorporate that. But if they don't know what other people are doing, then they don't have that option at all. Another thing we do is demonstrate value. Darcy mentioned our corporate sponsors. They want to know that their money is doing something, is having an impact, is important. And so one of the ways we do that is by telling them those stories. And we do reports to our sponsors, we do newsletters, all kinds of things to let them know that their money is being well spent and their money is making an enormous difference in people's lives. So, what makes a good story? When people talk about a good story, they often hear the 4 C's. And these are the 4 C's of good storytelling. Character, conflict, connection, and cutting edge. So character. Good stories are about people. I often get emails from people that say, hey, Carl, we had an event, it went really well, we screened so many athletes, and it was great. That is great, but it doesn't have that emotional impact until you put a face on it with an athlete that got that screening, that got those free eyeglasses, that got that free hearing aid. And that's what the story is the person. Conflict. You'll hear this anytime anyone talks about novel writing or anything like that. It's a protagonist overcoming an obstacle. In our case, it's pretty obvious. They're overcoming either a health problem or they're overcoming a health care system that doesn't work for them. So that one's pretty obvious and is incorporated in most of our stories. Connection is about the interaction between people at events and each other. So every good story has a relationship between either a person and another person, a person and an organization like Special Olympics, something of that nature. And then cutting edge. You normally think of this as a technology or something of that nature, and it could be. In some cases, we use very cutting-edge technologies in our screenings to help our athletes. But it doesn't have to be technology-wise. Cutting edge, when you're talking about from a story perspective, is anything that is unexpected or is new to the audience. And I selected this picture very deliberately. This is an athlete that we saw in Nebraska. And as you can see, he's well into his 60s. And he came to our Fun Fitness. And you can also see he's doing his strength test there. But you can also see he's in very good shape. Just this picture alone is cutting edge in a couple different ways. For one thing, people think that Special Olympics is all about helping little children. They often don't know that we have athletes from ages 8 to 80. And so the fact that we have an athlete who is his age is cutting edge in and of itself. He's also in very good physical condition. I'd hate to be doing that strength test after him because he'd probably beat me. So just the fact that we have that athlete in that good of shape at his age is cutting edge as well. The other thing that makes a good story is a quote from the athlete, from your character. I often like to think of it as a testimonial versus an advertisement. I can stand in front of an audience and tell them how great Healthy Athletes is. I get paid to do that. So it's sort of like a commercial. If you see a product on TV and it's a commercial and they tell you how great the product is, that's fine. But how much more impactful is it when your neighbor or your friend tells you that they have a product and it's a great product? It means a lot more coming from that person. Same way with our stories. It means a lot more when an athlete or a family member says, we went to Healthy Athletes and it made an amazing difference in our lives. So we always try to get the quotes from the family members, the athletes, to add to a story. Photos and video to accompany. Obviously, the story is always better with a photo, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. One final note about character. The other type of email I get a lot is, Carl, we had an event, and there was an athlete who had severe, myopia. He had negative 10, and he never had that glasses before. We put glasses on him, and now he could see. I'm like, that's an amazing story. What's the athlete's name? Oh, I don't know. Oh, where was he from? What sports did he play? I don't know. Again, a fantastic story, but if I can't follow up with that athlete or interview them or find a family member to talk to, I can't really do much with that story. So when you're doing your screenings, if you do nothing else with the story, get the name and get where they're from so I can follow up. I don't mind doing the legwork, but I need that information to do so. So they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Does anyone want to argue with me that this one does not say 1,000 words? Darcy spoke to you about 46% of our athletes having untreated dental decay. We talk about that a lot. We use this photo a lot. And we can talk up here all day about periodontal disease and how it affects heart disease and how it has an amazing impact on all aspects of health. We can talk about how difficult it is for a gentleman like this to have a job interview, how difficult it is for him to be included in the community simply because of the appearance. But it doesn't mean as much until we show this photo. And then people get it. And that's not the end of the story, because we also have this photo. This is before and after. This was a person with an intellectual disability who came to one of our consultants in either Tennessee or Kentucky, I forget which, and was treated. And you can imagine, just by looking at these two photos, the amazing impact it would have on his life after he saw that dentist. Again, it shows an emotion, tells a story. Now this photo is obviously posed, but you'll see as I go through a lot of our other photos, I usually like to have an action photo. That usually says a lot more than a photo that is posed. Now, I'm not discouraging photos that are posed because we do them in a lot of different ways. Volunteers like to have that photo of them all kind of posed together with the banner and with the athletes, and that's nice, and we can give that to the volunteers. So those are great, but when we're talking in a communication story point of view, we really prefer to have action photos. So what kind of stories are we looking for more specifically? Innovative practices. I mentioned that when we communicate, we talk to an internal audience, programs talking to other programs to talk about what they're doing well and what other programs might want to incorporate. This is what I'm talking about. So this particular article is about providing healthy foods while they're at our venues. We don't always do this. And sometimes it's hard to find sponsors that can provide us food that would be a good example when we're talking about athletes eating better. So this is a program that did just that. The sponsorship funding story. Again, we like to acknowledge our sponsors. We wouldn't be able to do this without them. And one of the ways we do that is by telling their story. This is a article about Hologic, which provides our bone density machines in our health promotion area. And I also like to use this article because you see my posed photo. They call that the grip and grin. Have anyone ever heard that term before? That's that classic photo where you're holding the plaque and you're shaking hands and you're looking at the camera doing this. So we do use those photos, and so feel free to use those photos and send them to me as well. Classic athlete story. This story here is about a athlete who was afraid of going to the dentist because going to the dentist isn't always fun. And he actually had a bad experience with a dentist who didn't give him Novocaine and provided some work on him. And so for years and years and years, he refused to go to the dentist. But then someone convinced him to go to Special Smiles. And we provided a fun atmosphere. We provided him, made him feel at ease, as our wonderful dentists are able to do. And so now he goes to the dentist regularly and gets his regular dental checkups. I also like to tell this story because I don't know if you can see it at the top, but this is an article that was actually written by Renee Deese, who's actually a former athlete who works in our office. So this article is about an athlete written by an athlete. Volunteer stories. We have amazing volunteers, just like we have amazing sponsors, and we like to talk about them as well. This particular article is about a volunteer in Fit Feet who also owned an athletic store, and he was able to talk to his distributors into getting some free shoes that he could pass out at a event. This was in Florida. And that's something that we're actually looking at doing on a bigger scale. But it shows that one volunteer in one small program can make an amazing difference. And when they do that, I need to know about it so I can share it with everyone. A local perspective. As I said, things aren't always done the same way everywhere. This story is actually from Côte d'Ivoire, and it's a very fun story. I'll tell you very briefly. We got an email from our regional coordinator in Africa, and he was apologizing to us. He said, "I'm very sorry. I had this event in Côte d'Ivoire in the middle of the middle of the country, and we only screened 24 athletes, and I apologize. But the week before, the government had dismissed all the cabinet members, and that provided great civil unrest. We're in the middle of possibly a flare-up in the civil war that's been going on for Côte d'Ivoire for years. This particular event took place in the middle of the country, right on the dividing line between rebel forces and government forces. And so, we didn't have a very successful event." We were like, "Are you kidding? That's amazing." That's an amazing success story that you had that event. You still held that event, and you're able to provide the services to 24 athletes with looting going on 400 yards down the street. So, amazing story that you wouldn't find in Kentucky, I hope not. But that gives us a local perspective on healthy athletes around the world. And your ideas. I don't get to go out to as many events as I would like to go out to, so often I don't know what's going on out there, but you do. I would love to hear your ideas, and we can work with them to make those happen, because I'm sure that you'll very soon have some amazing stories to tell me. So how do we get our story out? We have a electronic newsletter. It goes out every month. Some of you already receive it. The rest of you who are new to us will be receiving it. The fact that you've come here to be trained means that you're part of our community now, and I will add you to our list, and you'll be able to get these stories every single month. We also have a presence in social media, Facebook, keep going, Twitter. We have a Flickr account where we do photo sharing. That's a really great photo sharing tool that you probably may be familiar with. We have another blog. This is actually a Special Olympics blog. It's not just healthy athletes, but it reaches out to a larger audience than our Healthy Athletes newsletter, for instance. And so if we have great stories that I can incorporate into Special Olympics communications in general, that makes it even more powerful. We can reach even more people, and so that's really important. This story here is a really cute story. Since it is going out to a wider audience, we look for non-technical kind of cute stories or interesting stories that would be of interest to a wider audience. This story was great. We had a dental clinical director from, I think it was Wisconsin as well. She took her students to a polar plunge, and it was raising money for Special Olympics. And it was great and it was cute, but it was also important because while they were there, they were able to speak to the coaches and the athletes that were there and say, by the way, there's this thing called Special Smiles. You should come to it. And so by doing this event, which was also fun, they were also able to recruit athletes to come to the Special Smiles screening during that event. Darcy also showed you the story of Mission of Mercy. That was also from Wisconsin, since I'm on Wisconsin. That was another great story. It went up on our blog. It's in Darcy's presentation that gets viewed all over the world. It also went into a communication that Tim Shriver does. He does periodic distribution to the highest of the high people in health. We're talking the director of CDC. We're talking Kareem Dale, who does disability policy in the Obama administration. So he has a group of people who he shares stories with who are the top of the top policymakers. And that actually story went to that group as well. But again, that story wouldn't have gone to any of those people had Missy and her staff not emailed me and told me about it. Because there would have been no way I would have known about these stories except for them telling me about it. So how can you help then? I'm asking you to think about some of the things that I've been talking about. I know when you're doing screenings, you are very, very busy. It's maybe the last thing you might think about otherwise, but please, I'm asking you to try to keep an eye out for stories and think about the things that I've talked about here today and to know what would be a good story. And again, if nothing else, get the name and get the minor details and just let me know and I can follow up. Like I said, I don't mind doing the legwork. If you have an idea, email me. If you want to write a whole article, email me, because that's less work for me and I would love it. But I know, again, you're very busy, so I don't really need you to write articles, but I need to know what's going on out there so that I can write the articles. And share your video and stories with us. I know you often have your little digital cameras, so be snapping photos when you have a moment, and share those with me. We can put them on our Flickr page and share them with everybody, which is a great way of getting that word out. And if you have the capability for video, that's great. Again, it's not something I really expect you to be an expert on, because you're not experts on video. But if you can liaison with the communications staff in your programs, that's another way. Every program has communications staff. They may not necessarily think about healthy athletes, though, because they're very focused on the sport, families, other aspects of Special Olympics that's going on in their events. They may not think about healthy athletes. But if you could reach out to them and let them know that they're doing the screenings, that they have these amazing stories, they'd be glad to send their own photographers, their own video crews out to get those stories for you. And the final thing is to check out our Facebook page and like us on Facebook. The great thing about Facebook and Flickr and things like that is you don't even really need a person like me. If you have a great story or great photos, you can upload them yourselves. And I encourage you to do that. Of course, again, if you don't have the time, you can send them to me and I'd be glad to post them. But if you want to post your own information, feel free to do so, and you'll be communicating directly with each other. And anytime you have any questions, any stories, any ideas, don't hesitate to contact me. Let me know what's on your mind, and we'll take it from there. Thank you very much for your attention.